Chapter 26. Gabe loved when she bit her lip. It made him want to kiss her. But although she had thawed significantly during his explanation, he knew he was still on thin ice. He'd have to tell her everything. "I know I've made mistakes. I'm so sorry for them," he began. Imogen reached out now to rest her hand on his arm in support when he didn't continue. "It's okay. No one's perfect. I've never told anyone this, not even my sister, but I have PTSD." He said it all quickly and took a deep breath. Phew, he did it. "Post-traumatic stress disorder?" Imogen asked, wrinkling her nose in thought. "Yes, exactly that." Gabe nodded. "It was recommended I see a therapist. I did for a while, but talking about my feelings is really hard for me. It was causing me more stress, so I stopped going." He rubbed his face, then lay on his back, looking up at the roof. The wind shook the windows, but inside, they were in a bubble. He had to trust someone at some point. He wanted to trust Imogen with everything, because she was everything. He took a deep breath. "I have recurring nightmares, although they are more night terrors than anything." He couldn't look at her. "They're snapshots of memories, really, of things I've seen that just repeat over and again." "That sounds terrible, Gabe." She couldn't imagine how it must have been to relive those experiences and not be able to share with anyone. She'd never seen the kinds of things he did, so she couldn't understand, but she could empathize. Imogen reached out a hand and touched his arm softly. Gabe placed his hand over hers, squeezing gently, grateful she was willing to listen to his reluctant words. "I didn't want you to know. Anyone to know." Imogen frowned. "Gabe, it's nothing to be ashamed of. You're a good person who has seen some bad things. Of course it would haunt you, but it's not your fault." She looked at him closely, at the bags under his eyes and the scruff of his beard. "Is that why you didn't want to do overnights with me? Why you wanted to take things slow? Because of the nightmares?" He put his hands over his face, rubbing his eyes as if trying to erase memories from his vision. It was pointless. They never left. He nodded. Imogen was right. He didn't want to scare her if he woke up from a night terror, screaming and lashing out at a perceived threat. But if he were completely honest, he didn't want her to see him so vulnerable. "It's not as bad as some that suffer. I can function well for the most part. Periodically, though, I go through depressive episodes. This time of year is always worse." "Because of your parents?" Imogen prodded. He nodded. "I wasn't here. Harper had to deal with their loss and the aftermath all on her own. He was torturing himself, and she was tired of it. You can't protect everyone, Gabe. It's not your fault. It was an accident." Her words were brutal, but true. He knew that logically. Emotionally, though, he had trouble convincing himself. He nodded, but his eyes were still covered. When he didn't speak again, Imogen crossed the distance he'd put between them, laying her head on his chest and hugging him tightly. Her wordless support was the final straw. He broke down into body-racking sobs. It tore through him, all the bottled-up emotions, the fear, the loss, the guilt. He finally let it all go. Imogen lay there, not moving or saying a word for a long time, just clinging to him while he broke down. He'd been holding on to so much for so many years. It was no surprise that he wasn't sleeping at night. It certainly explained his haggard appearance. Finally, he quieted, his tears exhausted. She felt his arms tentatively wrap around her, holding her more closely to him. She was still upset. It would take her time to get over seeing him kiss someone else, but she understood. Despite his mistakes, he had taken steps to fix them, and that was something she could appreciate. Imogen closed her eyes, enjoying the rhythmic way he rubbed her back, and let the emotional and physical exhaustion of the day take her. Imogen awoke about an hour later, if she had to guess. Her cell phone was on the counter, so she couldn't verify. She wasn't sure what woke her, and she opened her eyes, surprised to find herself in the same position, wrapped around Gabe. He was solidly underneath her, his arms still clutching her tightly to him. Then her eyes tracked to the windows, and her eyes widened. The snow had stopped. She had no idea what time it was, but the sky was still dark. At some point, the wind had slowed, and the quiet must be what had woken her. "Do you feel better?" Gabe rumbled, his voice scratchy. "I do," she admitted. Hearing his version of events made sense. Maybe she was stupid to believe him, but he had a reputation for being a stand-up guy and had never given her a reason to doubt it. Everyone was allowed to make a mistake. Once. "Do you feel better?" Imogen lifted her head to look at him closely, resting her chin on his chest. "I do feel better, yeah." Gabe really did. It was as if he'd been carrying a large stone for years. He hadn't realized how much weight was on him until it was gone. He squeezed his redhead to him, grateful she had been willing to listen to him and accept him, flaws and all. "You know," she started, looking up at him from under her lashes. "You can tell me anything. I want you to tell me. I want to know every part of you." How did he get so lucky? She was everything he could ever ask for. Strong, fearless, determined, honest, and forgiving. Was it any wonder that he wanted to spend his life with her? The realization hit him hard. He wanted to spend every moment he could with her, for the rest of his life. Thinking about it, he was pretty sure he knew she was the one from the moment she woke up spitting mad, called him a pervert, then proceeded to vomit on his shoes. He smiled at the memory. She traced his smile with a finger, enjoying the way he'd let his facial hair grow into a beard for winter. He caught her wandering finger and kissed it before placing it back on his chest over his heart. "I love you, Imogen." She smiled at him, pleased to hear the words. He tended to show his feelings more with actions and affection than with words of endearment, and he rarely called her by her full name unless he was deadly serious. "I love you too, Gabe, even when you do stupid things." She squinted at him, and he laughed like she'd intended. "I didn't realize I do that many stupid things," he said. "Oh yes, you've been quite stupid recently. Are you over it?" she teased. "I'm definitely over it," he agreed, turning serious again. "But I'll never be over you." He sat up slightly so he could look her in the eye more easily. "I don't want to imagine my life without you." Imogen felt the same way. She couldn't explain how important Gabe had become to her. He was the first person she thought of in the morning, and she craved time with him. He was her complete opposite in every way, dark to her light, tall to her short, introverted to her extroverted. But he was incredibly sweet, gentlemanlike, and was always there to back her up. She felt stronger with him in her corner, like a better version of herself. "You don't have to imagine life without me. I've packed up everything I own. It's official. I'm a Vermonter." She grinned. "Well, you haven't made it through your first winter yet, but you're doing great so far." He grinned, his dimples showing. "I'm sorry I doubted you when you said you would stay. I know. I was afraid that you'd change your mind." "You did?" Imogen frowned. He'd never told her that. "I don't know why. I thought I was pretty clear." "You were very clear. It was just my own anxiety and insecurity shining through." Gabe felt better admitting it out loud. He was so afraid of letting himself get close to someone that he'd inadvertently been holding himself back fully. Every time she got just a little too close, he had physically distanced himself, with work, pushed her away, like their fight on Christmas Eve, and using his friend's arrival as an excuse to put his focus elsewhere. He'd been so closed off for so many years that he hadn't even realized he'd done it. It took the events of the last 12 hours to shock him out of his bad habits. He was resolved to learn from this and be the person that Imogen truly deserved. You insecure? Imogen couldn't imagine it. He was a lot deeper than she knew. She had to remind herself that they'd only been dating a few months, and there was still a lot to learn about each other. Yes, me. I've never felt so strongly about anyone before. Certainly not so quickly. Gabe took the plunge. I know we're just beginning, but I want a future with you. Me too, Imogen admitted, relieved he felt it too. But I'm excited and scared, all wrapped together, and it's bouncing around my insides. Is that what that is? Because I feel it too. They smiled at each other. It's nice to be on the same page, Gabe admitted. He knew in his gut one day they'd share their lives together when the time was right. Gabe drew her up his body so she lay more fully atop him. Imogen loved how tall he was, and that he was lean muscle and she could feel everything through their base layers. Don't tease me, she admonished. They'd shared little more than some deep kisses over the last few months. Every time she hoped to go a little further, he'd stepped back, claiming he wanted to take his time and go slowly. She didn't think she could take it if he were to hold back again. Her feelings were too close to the surface, too ready to burst out. Don't worry, Jersey. I promise you'll love when I tease you tonight. Gabe pulled her face down slowly, nipping her bottom lip, before soothing it with a soft caress of his tongue. Imogen shivered. Promise? She breathed huskily. The best thing about getting lost in the woods with your handsome boyfriend? No one was around to interrupt.